Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Lokashankaram. So in the last class of Vivekachudamani, we started with a discussion on the sadhana chatushtaya, the fourfold spiritual practices which are required to be qualified to practice the spiritual path following the Vedanta. So, what are they? As has been enunciated in the 19th sloka of Vivekachudamani, they are the Viveka, Vairagya, Shama Damadi Shat Sampatti and Mumukshutvam. So these are the fourfold spiritual practices. First comes Viveka, that means discrimination between the real and the unreal, between the eternal and the ephemeral. That's Viveka. Followed by Vairagya, means renunciation of the transitory enjoyments, that which is ephemeral, and getting established in our identity which is eternal. So this speaks of Vairagya, followed by Shama Damadi Shat Sampatti. There are 6 treasures which we have to inculcate, which we have to internalize. They start with Shama, and next is Dhamma. Adi speaks of the other 4. Shama, Dhamma, Shat, the 6 treasures, the 6 spiritual treasures. What are they? Shama speaks of mental calmness. Dhamma means the control of the senses. Then comes Uparati, bringing the mind again and again back to the object of your contemplation. Titiksha is perseverance, and then comes Shraddha, the faith in the words of Guru, faith in the words of scriptures, and then Samadhana or Samadhi, which leads to the deep contemplation of the self. And the last practice is the Mumukshutvam, the intense yearning for spiritual realization. So we already started studying these fourfold practices. Whatever we have studied, we will recapitulate quickly before we conclude, before we complete the study of the sadhana chatushtaya, the fourfold spiritual practices. So first is Viveka. As we read in the last class, the 20th sutra, what it speaks, Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya Iti Evang Rupa Vinishchaya Sa Ayang Nitya Anitya Vastu Viveka Samudaritaha. Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya. This world is, this universe is unreal. Brahman alone is real. Iti Evang Vinishchaya. A firm conviction in this fact that Brahman alone is real and the universe is unreal is designated as discrimination. Sa ayam nitya anitya vastu viveka samudarita. This alone is designated as the discrimination between the eternal and the ephemeral. As in the last class, we were highlighting the fact that in the second line it is mentioned that nitya anitya vastu viveka. That generally Viveka is described as the discrimination between the eternal and the ephemeral. But Shankaracharya is stressing the point that the eternal is the only reality and ephemeral is mithya. It's not only that it is a flow, it's not only that it is temporary, it has no as such substantial reality. It is a mere projection. In the present day language, it is virtual. It has no as such tangible reality. Why he is stressing that? Because the next spiritual treasure which we have to develop, the spiritual practice which we have to develop, which we have to inculcate, is Vairagya. And Shankaracharya is giving stress on the reality and the unreality, because that even in this world we find that we know that everything is flowing, everything is temporal. But still that doesn't ensure renunciation of that. Very well knowing that the thing is not permanent, we still cling to it. In the modern day language, the idea that everything is ephemeral is there. They don't have the idea of afterlife. As per the materialistic way of thinking, this is only one life, so enjoy it. Just see, the idea of ephemeral is there. It's a flow. It's something which is not going to be there. But it gives the idea, with that we have the idea as only one life is there, with it different, from a different paradigm. Instead of developing renunciation, we can get deeply attached to it. But can we ever get attached to something which as such has no substantial reality? You can get attached to some other person, knowing it to be real. But can you ever get attached to something which you are watching as virtual in a movie or something? You can develop an enjoyment, but you can never get attached the way we can get attached with a being, a person, or some other entity. The moment I know it's virtual, the question of getting attached to it doesn't come. I cannot, as such, develop emotional attachment with something which is virtual, which is not there at all. So Shankaracharya is saying that whatever you see as flow is actually mere projection of the thing which is eternal, which is permanent, which has no change, which is having no shara vikara, which is trikalavadita. It was, it is, it will be. And throughout the eternity, it has no transformation. It is not aging. It is Purana Purusha. Pura api navaiva. Ever aging, never old. That's the reality. That is being projected because of ignorance. The mind coming to existence. And through the mind, I am seeing this eternal as this world of flow. That's why it is called samsara. Samsarati iti samsara. So this flow is something which is apparent. It's not real. The reality is something unchanging. It is eternal and unchanging. So once you know that my real existence is something eternal and unchanging, and whatever change I see is a mere flow, is not having any tangible reality. It is something like a virtual reality. The question of attachment to it doesn't arise. So that's why he is stressing that Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya. That generally we define Vivek as Nitya Anitya Vastu Viveka, but Shankaracharya is stressing the fact that Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya, this conviction alone can lead to the next practice, the Vairagya. Otherwise, you can get attached to a flow. You can get attached to something which is temporary, but you can never get attached to something which as such has no substantial reality. So that's why he's stressing so much on the idea that Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya is Viveka. And that from that follows Vairagya. Once you know this world as such has no substantial reality, from a blade of grass to the state of Brahma. What is Brahma? The cosmic mind. In Vedanta, the idea is the conscious, the eternal conscious principle. Because of ignorance. What is ignorance? We don't know how it has happened. That's ignorance. That the conscious principle, why it finds expression as the cosmic mind. First comes the mind. This world is nothing but information. Even in modern science they are saying it is information. It's nothing else but information. That information is finding expression. Because of the limitation of our senses, this information appears as this world which is which appears to be solid, which appears to be something inert, hard, all the living beings with the physical bodies, is a mere projection. With the science nowadays, we have started understanding it much better. So, this projection is after all apparent. Maybe it's something very, very trivial like a simple blade of grass, or it may be the state of the Brahma, the cosmic mind, from where the entire physical world has evolved. The cosmic principle first evolves as the Brahma, the cosmic mind. From there, this world, which is tangible to our senses, that evolves from that. It is just like even in our present world, that whatever we create, every creation is twice. Everything we create twice. Just the building. Suppose you are going to construct a building. It's not that the moment you resolve to have a building, the very first day you will bring the bricks, the cement, all the so-called the building materials, not on the very first day. First, it is in your mind. You have an idea that what the house should be like, what should be its design, how many rooms it should have, and what all facilities I should have. All those is in my mind. And then I prepare a blueprint. After the blueprint is prepared, then only that real work starts. So similarly, this Brahma is the blueprint, the cosmic plan from which the world has evolved. This world of physical reality has evolved. So from that state, the cosmic mind, to this gross world, and the insignificant thing in this gross world, like a small creature or even a blade of grass, whatever it may be, everything is after all a mere projection. It doesn't have any substantial reality. Brahman alone is appearing as that. So when you know that, what happens? You develop a sense of renunciation. At present, we are so much identified with the projection that we have forgotten our own reality. So the moment you know that this is a projection, that renunciation comes. What's that renunciation? That vairagya. Tat vairagyam. The next verse says, Tat vairagyam jugupsa ya darshana sravanadivi. Whatever I see, darshana, sravana, whatever I hear, adibhi, adibhi means etc., other five senses, means whatever I see, whatever I hear, the other three are not mentioned. What are they? Whatever I touch, whatever I taste, whatever I smell. That's what's meant by adibhi. Darshana, sravana. So all these five senses which constitutes my reality is mere projection. So if that be so, then dehadi brahma pariyanta. My physical body, that's also is what I see. I see my own body. I can touch my own body. I can just have all the five senses are something which asserts my existence as a body. And the same five senses, with these five senses, though in a much more subtle way, with which I can get identified with the cosmic intelligence. So everything is that projection. So when you know it's a projection, anything that is a projection is anitya. It's not something which has substantial reality. It appears as long as the ignorance is there. How long I see a snake in a rope? As long as there's ignorance. The rope was, the rope is, the rope will be. Because of insufficient light in the twilight hours, at certain point of time, my ignorance, because of ignorance, I start seeing the rope as the snake. Does the rope has changed? No. It is still the rope. But because of ignorance, I start seeing it as a snake. How long I see it snake? Till someone brings light, and just with sufficient light, my ignorance falls off. The knowledge dawns. I see, oh, it's rope. The snake was not there. It was there only because of ignorance for certain amount of time. When the ignorance dawned and when the ignorance fell off. Till there, then that the snake was there. So similarly, this entire creation is like that snake which we are seeing in the rope. The eternal conscious principle, when finds expression as the universe, There is various spectrum of existence. Just a white light passing through the prism. The prism is like that cosmic mind. White light is that conscious principle. When it passes through that, we find that the white light breaks into the spectrum of 7 colors. Actually, it is not 7 colors. Infinite bands are there. We can see 7. So beyond violet, ultraviolet bands are there. Infrared bands are there. Our sense perception allows us to see that 7 spectrum. So all the spectrum which I can perceive and all the spectrum which I cannot perceive is because of the prism. If they remove the prism, all the spectrum which I perceive or which I don't perceive, they all merge in the white light. So if I know for certain that all these various spectrum of existence, from this insignificant physical body to the state of Brahma, they are the various spectrums of existence projected through the cosmic mind, then the question of getting attached to the spectrum doesn't arise. I know that in reality I am that conscious principle. So that renunciation is bound to develop once you ascertain that fact. You become vinishcha, you are convinced of the fact that after all, this all is a mere projection. It has no as such substantial reality. So from Deha to the state of Brahma, you, knowing them to be anitya, you lose the the hankering for enjoyment for any of the states of existence. So that's the vairagya. I can never just get attached to something which has no substantial reality. I can never get attached to a photo. I can never get attached to some image, some virtual image, something which has been projected. I can never get attached. So that vairagya is bound to follow. And from that, next comes the shama damadi shat sampatti. Shama, once you have developed this renunciation, from that the calmness of mind is bound to follow. This projection of your senses out has to stop, of the senses of the mind, it has to stop. This calmness of the mind, which comes following the vairagya renunciation, is shama. The shama damadi shat sampatti, the 6 treasures. First is the shama. What is this shama? Virajya vishaya vratat dosha drishtya muhurmuhu swalakshe niyatavastha manasa shama uchyate. So the resting of the mind steadfastly on its goal, that is Brahman. Swalakshe niyatavastha, that means the resting of the mind steadfastly on its goal, after having detached itself from the manifold, these various sense objects, by continually observing their defects. Dosha drishtya muhurmuhu. You constantly go on observing the defects, and that way you start developing this detachment from all these varied sense objects. This is known as shama, the calmness of the mind. I don't project my mind outside through the senses. I keep the mind as if in contemplation of my real nature. So this is the practice called shama. So first comes this calmness of the mind. And if the mind is calm, the senses are bound to be in rest. They will be resting. They won't project out. Because it is a mind through which the senses, it is first mind take the resolution, then only the sense becomes active. If the mind is at rest, it is not taking any resolution, it is not taking any sankalpa, the senses naturally are not going to project out. It will be at rest. So shama is obviously followed by dhamma. So dhamma is what? Vishayebhya paravartya. Paravartya means it is taking away, returning back, not allowing it to get engaged with the objects. Vishayebhya paravartya sthapanam swaswa golake. Very interesting. This all the sense organs are having certain orifices. The eye has its own orifice, the ear has its own orifice, the nose has its own orifice, mouth has its own orifice, the skin has innumerable orifices. So this Golaka means these orifices. So all the Vishaya, to interact with the world, our mind as if gets projected to the world, gets identified with the world by passing through these orifices. So you don't allow the mind to pass through these orifices. You allow you ensure that the senses remain in their orifices. It's not moves out. That's the idea. Vishayabhya paravartya. You just turn around from the objects of senses and keep the sense organs in their orifices without allowing them to get identified with the sense objects. Ubhayesham indriyana. So it is not only the organ of perception, that we have 5 organs of perception and 5 organs of action. 5 organs of perceptions are the eyes, the ears, the nose, the taste, and the touch, the skin. And what are the 5 organs of action? The hands, the feet, the vagendriya, the organ of speech, and organ of evacuation, and organ of procreation. So these are the 5 organs of action. Pancha karmendriya, pancha jnanendriya. So that's what is meant by ubhayesham indriyana. So both the organs of action as well the organs of perception, I keep them restrained. I don't allow them to project out. I just keep them where they are supposed to be at rest, in their own orifices, in their own golaka. That is the practice of Dhamma. The organ, this controlling of the sense, self-control. Now, we raised one question, if you remember. If Shama, if I don't attach my mind to the sense organs, then why should I describe Dhamma as a separate practice? It automatically follows. If my mind is calm, then my senses are at rest. It cannot move out. Then why this Dhamma has been categorized as one of the practices separately? The reason, there's a definite reason. Sometimes we become overconfident. By practice, I think I have controlled my mind. Now I go out, interact with the world. I have developed that capacity. My mind won't be affected. Sometimes we are confident. We think I can just go and mix with the world. I know I have developed Viveka, I have developed Vairagya. My mind is calm. It won't be affected. But know it for certain, this mind and senses are riveted. Anything which is riveted, you move one, the other is bound to move. In the cycle, if you just go on, moving the paddle, if you're revolving the paddle, the wheels will move. But we don't do it. But if you move the wheels, the paddle also will move. The paddle also, if you just go on physically turning the wheel, you will find the paddle is also moving because they're riveted, they're geared together. Similarly, the mind and the senses are geared together. Yes, if we control the mind, the senses are calm. But if I allow the senses to interact with the world, with the confidence that I have developed that calmness, nothing is going to affect me. Know it for certain, even if you keep yourself mind engaged with the world, if your senses engaged with the world, it is bound to affect the mind. So that's why Dhamma has been enunciated separately. That don't be that overconfident, thinking that I have controlled my mind, now the world cannot disturb me. That do happen only after realization. It's a very early stage. In this stage, know it for certain, both are required. I have to keep my mind calm, and I have to ensure that I am always placed in favorable circumstances, favorable environment, which will ensure the enrichment of my spiritual evolution. I shouldn't keep myself in such environment which may prove to be detrimental for my spiritual growth. You will find even that Sri Ramakrishna used to say that in the presence of the senses, even nishkama, one who has gone beyond the desires, for him also we find the desire starts creeping in. That in the Nishkamero Kam Hoy. So, and he gives another example that if you are staying in a room whose wall is painted with the soots, when there's a fire, the smokes, when the smoke cannot come out, most probably there is a glass covering. In the glass covering, you will find there's a layer of soot. With that soot, if you collect that soot and with that you paint the wall of a room and you start staying in that room. Sri Ramakrishna is saying, however careful you may be, you know it for certain, if you are staying in a room whose walls are painted with the soot, you are going to get tainted now and then, however careful you may be. So don't associate with the objects of senses. Don't be that overconfident. Try to keep your mind calm and try to be exclusively in such environment as much as possible where it ensures that your senses do not get engaged with the so-called objects of senses. So that is the practice of Dhamma. So Shama, Dhamma. Then comes Uparati. What is that Uparati? Bahya na alambanam vritte esha Uparati uttama. We all can experience this. Bahyam na alambanam vritte. Vritta means the waves of the mind, the modulations of the mind. You will find what it is very interesting. That yes, I have started practicing the shama, calming down of my mind. I don't expose myself to the so-called objects of the senses. But that doesn't ensure that my mind, even without its contact with objects of senses, doesn't simply goes on visualizing the objects of senses. You'll find that though you have no touch with you are exclusively keeping yourself apart from the sense objects, trying your best to keep your mind calm, but you will find because of the past latent impressions, samskaras, the mind do have a tendency to create its own world through visualization, all sorts of visualization. And that visualization itself can create the world of all the five senses. Smell, touch, through visualization. It can be very vivid. So sometimes we will find that though I am trying to keep my mind calm, I am not allowing my senses to get engaged with the sense objects, but mind goes visualizing all those things, all the objects of senses. It gets distracted and starts visualizing. Uparati is the practice of not be aware of that fact. You don't allow the mind to just visualize the objects of senses and go on mentally enjoying the objects of senses. So that is Uparati. So there comes the mindfulness. You are constantly mindful about what you allow allow the mind to visualize, what vrittis you allow to raise there. So, Bahyana alambanam vrittehe. There's not allowing the chitta vrittis to take the form of the external objects. That even when I am exclusively, I have just detached myself from the sense objects, but the mind can still go on visualizing the objects of senses. So I stop that, not allowing the chitta vrittis to take the form of the external objects. That is Uparati. And then comes the practice of Titiksha. Now Titiksha, to a certain extent, Uparati is with the visualization, is with the sense objects. And Titiksha is a practice which corresponds to the feelings. Sukha, dukkha, these feelings. So I have to go beyond these feelings. What is this? Sahanam sarva dukkhanam. I endure all dukkha, afflictions, apratikara purvakam, without trying to counteract them. I endure all afflictions without caring to counteract them. Now sometimes we find that the weak do develop the power of endurance because they know I don't have the power to counteract all sorts of exploitation. You will find the so-called weak, sometimes they become very passive. The helplessness results in passivity. From helplessness comes passive. If you feel you are helpless, your consequence, reaction is you become passive. So is titiksha something, that passiveness which comes from helplessness? No. That's why spirituality do speak of strength. You do have the capacity to react to the situation. It's not that you're helpless. But for your own spiritual growth, you have understood very well that all the, this projection of the mind, whether it's the feelings, whether it's the perceptions, it's all entails in distraction. It breaks the calmness of the mind. It doesn't allow me to contemplate on the real nature. So I willingly, that it's not because of helplessness, willingly I resolve that I won't be affected by the dualities of my existence in the form of sukha, dukkha. But here they have mentioned only dukkha, not sukha. Sahanang sarva dukkhana. Then am I allowed to enjoy the sukha, the pleasures of life, that I only somehow endure the dukkha and I am permitted to enjoy the sukha? No. We should always remember the fact that in Vedanta, the idea is all our experiences ultimately results in dukkha. Though apparently it may be sukha, ultimately it results in dukkha. And we translate the word dukkha as suffering. It's not the exact translation. The word dukkha means dissatisfaction. That you can never be satisfied. So that's why don't go out for it. It will, like the fire, the more you pour oblations in it, the more it flares up. It never gets satiated. Similarly, all our pleasures, though apparently it appears it gives us pleasure, but no, ultimately it is going to create suffering because we are never satisfied by it. The more we enjoy, the more the thirst for it gets flared up, the more it increases. So that way, all our experiences in the form of joy ultimately results in sorrow. It cannot give us ultimate satisfaction. In the words of Swamiji, it's like ever running, never reaching, nor a distant glimpse of shore. All these sense enjoyments are like that. So if that be the case, don't go out for sukha. It will result in dukkha. Just be within yourself. Just endure all the afflictions without caring to counteract them. And if you are doing it because you are weak, then internal grudge will develop. Oh, as I don't have the strength, I am helpless. So that's why I am passive. But that doesn't ensure the inner calmness. But when you are doing it willingly, with some spiritual goal in mind, then this practice is bound to be associated with Chinta Vilapa Rahitam, that free from anxiety and lament. That no one is forcing you. You have adopted that practice. So there is no question of feeling any sense of anxiety or lamentation that I am suffering within. No such thing. With calmness, you go on enduring. As Swami Vivekananda very nicely gives an example, that a sadhu was meditating in the deep jungle, and he was constantly contemplating on the fact that he is the self. Soham, Soham. And as he used to repeat that Soham, the villagers on the opposite bank of the river, the forest was on one of the bank of the rivers, and on the other side of the river there was a village. From the village, the villagers could hear that a monk in the forest, he is not visible, but his voice can be heard, that he is chanting Soham, Soham, I am that. And one day a tiger came, pounced upon this monk, and he was dragged deep into the forest. And at last it was killed. But till his last breath, the villagers could hear that his chanting has not stopped. He is going on chanting, Soham, Soham. So that speaks of this titiksha, that nothing of this external world can disturb me. Because if I know it's a mere appearance, the question of getting afflicted by it doesn't arise. Whether it is something pleasurable or whether it is something which is resulting in pain, I in no way am attached to it. So this practice speaks of the highest ideal, that how much we are going to adopt in our life, that depends on our strength, that depends on our yearning. But let us not say this is impractical. Throughout the history of spirituality, we find when the spiritual practitioner do develop that yearning, do develop that conviction, this world after all is just something transient, impermanent, it's a mere projection, who has developed the deep conviction. For them this practice have become something natural. They are never bothered about that. Swami Vivekananda, we will find that there's a story. He was in the forest and suddenly a lion from nowhere came and he was just standing in front of him. And what the idea Swamiji had? That let this body satiate its hunger. At least it will serve some purpose for that lion. Why this idea came? The same, this idea that I am the self. This body may drop off. It doesn't in any way affect the real me. So this conviction enables them to practice titiksha. It is not something, a negative thing. They have their identification with something which is permanent. Swami Vivekananda used to say that it is very difficult for you in the West, when he was giving lecture in the West, to understand the courage of a Vedantin. For you, courage means to stand in front of the these arms, these weapons, these missiles, all these are projected. You are standing, confronting the gunshot, the fire, the missiles. You are just confronting, and you think to be in the frontier of the battlefield is courage. You don't realize the courage by which this monk is even ready to give up his body with his full conviction that he is the self. This is also a type of courage, different courage. This titiksha speaks of that nothing can affect me, whatever it is that may happen to my body-mind complex. It is in no way going to affect me. So it goes on enduring all the afflictions without caring to counteract them. At the same time, being free from anxiety and lament is called titiksha. In Karma Yoga, Swami Vivekananda, you will find very nicely have described that as per our highest spiritual ideal is concerned, it is non-resistance. But at the same time, he is saying an interesting thing. There's the highest ideal. You shouldn't fool yourself. You should just question yourself. Or is that real, that sense have developed in you? That you have reached that spiritual height where you can feel that nothing can affect you. Whatever may happen to my body, whatever may happen to my so-called psychophysical existence, it is not going to affect me. So that is the practice for the highest. For others who have not yet reached that state, of course some resistance is okay. But know it for certain that non-resistance is the highest ideal. Though you may not be capable of practicing it now, but that should be the ideal. That you should always have that idea that I have to reach a state where that resistance is no more something which impels me from within as a reflex. It has fallen off. Nothing affects me. It has become my conviction. And that's the practice of titiksha. And then comes the practice of Shraddha. Shastrasya, Guru Vakyasya, Shatya Buddhi Avadharanam Sa Sraddha Kathitha Sadbhi Yaya Vastu Upalabhyate. Acceptance with firm conviction as true what the scriptures have said, Shastra, and Guru Vakya, and what my Guru has spoken of. As in the last class also give you that example. When you go to the doctor, the first thing which is required is a faith in the doctor. Because I know nothing of the medical science, but I have faith that the doctor is an authentic person. He has studied the medical science, which I believe. There's a well-researched subject. A lot of research has gone to it. And this doctor is the one who has studied it thoroughly. He is an authentic person who knows the medical subject. And now, whatever he prescribes, I don't question. If I have to be explained everything, sometimes I will find it is almost impossible. Though the doctor can give me an idea that what the treatment is, but I don't know the intricacies of it. The doctor has spent years for studying it. To a great extent that faith is required. With faith I go, whatever he prescribes, I follow that prescription and get cured. So here also the same thing, that Guru and Shastra. The Shastra is like the scriptures, the following which my Guru, the spiritual teacher, has also attained that spiritual illumination. So whatever path is prescribing for me, whatever is prescribing, that prescription if I follow, that can result in the curing of the Bhava Roga Vyadhi, the great disease of this worldliness. That is a big disease. The self which is non-local thinks that it is local, that it is this body-mind complex. That is disease. All the disease, what is a sign of disease? That whenever your consciousness is getting localized, that is the sign of disease, any disease. That when you are healthy, you are not aware of any particular part of your body. The health thrives, your prana thrives through the entire body. Just see a child bubbling. The moment you're diseased, what happens? If you ask that what has happened to you, your ease has gone. Why your ease has gone? That the prana, your life force which was finding expression through your entire body, now gets localized. You say, I have a headache. My heart is paining. There's an ache in my heart. My stomach is I'm not feeling good. There's a stomach ache. My knees are paining. The consciousness which was pervading your entire body now got localized to a particular part of body. That speaks of disease. Similarly, the non-local, non-dual consciousness, because of ignorance, when it gets localized in this psychophysical existence, the sun, the way it gets reflected in the innumerable waves of the ocean, each wave is having the reflection of the sun. And if I think there are innumerable suns seeing the reflection, the way we are deluded, the same way we are deluded, the same conscious principle is being reflected in each and every psychophysical existence. And I get identified with the reflection and think myself to be local. And that's the cause of the disease. Your ease has gone now. Your consciousness, which was non-local, is localized. So, only by listening to the word of Guru and of the scripture, their prescription, I can go beyond this localized consciousness to get identified with the non-local consciousness. So for that I should have faith in the words of the Guru. And what does faith speaks of? It is not something mere a verbal proclamation. Just going to the Guru and says, I have full faith. The real faith speaks of what? That what Guru says, that immediately what the scripture says, knowing it to be true, you start following it in your life. You start walking your talk. Otherwise, there is no faith. I may say I have faith in your words, but at the same time my life shows it has in no way changed. It is following the old way of living. That what speaks, you have no satya buddhi. Shastrasya, Guru Vakyasya, Satya Buddhi. If you know that it is truth, then just instead of merely professing the words of the scriptures by saying I believe in them, but my life doesn't reflect in any way what I believe. I don't walk my talk. I haven't internalized them. They have not changed my reflexes. They have not become the nervous association of ideas. It cannot be Shraddha. So that's why the Satya Buddhi word is very important in the definition of Shastra, in the definition of Shraddha. That once you know for certain that my words of the Guru, the words of the Shastra is true, then I am not supposed to act contradictory to it. Once I know that, my body mind should follow it. So that's the practice of Shraddha. The aspirant whose mind has been trained by Sama and Dhamma, Uparati, Titiksha, alone can have such Shraddha. He has already trained himself. Now he is capable to follow the words of Guru. Just, in ditto, just without any deviation. Unless one has practiced this Sama, Dhamma, Uparati, Titiksha, Shraddha is not possible. Because it's not just mere verbal acceptance, it is just a verbal proclamation that I have faith. It has to find expression through our life. So that's why this Shraddha, unless the Satya Buddhi has come. So that's why we find these are all sequential. Unless I have already got established in Sama, Dhamma, Uparati, Titiksha, there cannot be Shraddha. So Shraddha, when I have already developed this practices, I have all got established in this practice of Shama, Dhamma, Uparati, Titiksha, then comes Shraddha. Straightforwardly hold on to the words of Guru and Scripture, and that leads to the next practice, that is Samadhana. So I get qualified for Samadhi, for the deep contemplation, absorption. So what is Samadhana? The next, the 27th sloka, that speaks of. So this definition of Satya, we will find how Ramakrishna is indicating that there's one whose words conforms to his thoughts. Mon, Mukh, Ak. That is the practice of Satya. Unless you have developed that Mon, Mukh, Ak, what you are thinking, that's what you are speaking. Your speech never contradicts your thought. Then you know you got established in Satya. And then only you can have proper faith. And when you have developed that Satya Buddhi, then this practice of Samadhana is possible. Now what is Samadhana, Samadhi? Let's go to the definition. Sarvada sthapanam buddhe shuddhe brahmani sarvatha tat samadhanam ityuktam natu chittasya lalanam. Sarvada sthapanam buddhe, to this perfect establishment of the Buddhi. The Buddhi is always established perfectly without any deviation. In what? Shuddhe Brahmani Sarvata. In that pure Nirguna Brahman. The non-dual, non-local Brahman. You have developed through all those practices that the faculty of keeping your Buddhi in that contemplation of Brahman, Shuddhe Brahmani Sarvatha, always, without any deviation. Tat Samadhanam Ityuktam. That is said to be Samadhana. Natu Chittasya Lalanam. Not the indulgence of mind. Now there may be a doubt that there seems to be no difference between Shama and Samadhana. Shama was also that calmness of the mind. I keep my mind in the contemplation of the self, and I don't allow the mind to get engaged with the sense objects. And here Samadhi, that started with Shama, and then the last practice is Samadhi, Samadhanam. But as per definition, it appears both the same. But we have to study the definitions very carefully. So now, Shama was something which was related to the mind. And Samadhanam is something which is related to the Buddhi. Now there is difference between Mana and Buddhi. Trying to keep the mind calm is Shama. And try keeping the Buddhi in the contemplation of the self is Samadhi. So what is the difference between Mana and Buddhi? This first we have to understand. Mana is Sankalpa Vikalpatmak. You find with this mind what is happening? constantly is jumping from thought to thought. I am resolving something, that in my mind some resolution is happening. The next moment, again, I may just act contradictory to the resolution. No. That resolution, my mind doesn't work as per the resolution, it is going against it. Or it may take some other path, it may reframe it. In Sanskrit we may say that it is kartum, akartum, anyatha kartum. Shall I do it? Should I not do it? Or should I do it but in a bit different way? So this is what speaks of sankalpa, vikalpa, atmak, mana. So it is having these options. So now Shama speaks of what? The mind is having various options. It is not yet calm. It is going to these distracted thoughts. You are bringing it back again to keep it in that idea that you are the self, in that Brahmakara vritti. The vritti which has taken the form of Brahma, that I am the self, aham brahmasmi. You are trying to keep the mind in that thought. It is distracting, again you are trying to bring it back. So that is the mana. And trying to bring the mind again and again back to that Brahmakara vritti is Shama. But Dhamma, this Samadhi is what? It is not the mana, it is buddhi. Sarvada sthapanam buddhi. Through your practice of Shama, Dhamma, Uparati, Titiksha, now you are able to keep your mind fixed in one thought. Now what is buddhi? Nishchayatmika buddhi. Now of the various options that the mind has, from that it gets fixed in one choice. There are so many ways in which the mind is traveling, and I choose that I am as if in the crossroads. And I don't know which road I have followed. So mind is just sankalpa vikalpatmak. That it is judging, it is trying to find out the way. And once it finds out the way and starts traveling, now the same mind faculty has become buddhi. It has now gone beyond the choice. Now it is ascertained that yes, that in our life we always find that there are so many options, and then we have a conviction that I am going to follow this option and start proceeding as per my chosen option. So when we find at the beginning the mind is constantly wavering, I have to bring it back through this and keep it on the fixed goal. Through this practice, gradually it so happens that the mind no more deviates. It gets convinced. Nishchayatmika. Nishchaya means conviction. So when your mind has got convinced, the distractions have fallen off. Now it is just thinking of that one thought. So now struggling with the mind has stopped. It has become a flow of that one thought. So it has entered that faculty of buddhi, nishchayatmika buddhi. And that buddhi has been spoken of in this definition. Sarvada sthapanam buddhe. Your buddhi is always established. In what? Shuddhe brahmani sarvata. Always, without an interruption. In the scriptures they give the example of pouring oil from one vessel to other. Taila dharavat. When you pour oil from one vessel to other, there is no interruption. It's a constant flow because of the viscosity. It's a continuous flow. So like that your mind, like the pouring of the oil, is constantly thinking of Brahman. It has happened through the practices. You have gone beyond the faculty of mana. It has now entered the faculty of buddhi, nishchayatmika, without deviation. In a single thought your mind is holding on to. This is samadhana. So there is the sankalpa vikalpa has stopped. So you remember in that how to stop the sankalpa vikalpa? By constantly contemplating on the dosha drishti, that what are the defects of the sense of enjoyments, that they can not give me the ultimate pleasure. They just create dissatisfaction. This is the dosha drishti, that when my mind was wavering, I was constantly trying to find the defects and trying to bring it back. So that has stopped. Now I have become an adept in this practice. Now my mind spontaneously remains fixed in the thought of Brahman. So now your mind has now got, evolved into the faculty of the buddhi without any deviation from your contemplation of the self. So that speaks of samadhana. So when you have entered that uninterrupted flow, your mind has entered the state of uninterrupted thought flow, which speaks of only one vritti, that's the Brahma Akara. It has taken that vritti, it is still a vritti. It doesn't speak of the ultimate realization. Ultimate realization happens after that. This Brahma Akara, your thought which has taken the form of Brahman, as if Brahma Akara Vritti. So it is still a thought. When you are saying I am Brahman, who is saying it? It is the mind. The mind is saying it. So you may say that this is still a thought. Yes, it is still a thought, but this is the thought which takes you to the ultimate realization. How it takes it? This samadhana will be constantly hammering on the idea that you are the limited self. This idea of the limited self is linked with all our vasanas, vyakta and avyakta, all the desires which are manifested, which are not manifested, which may manifest later. I cannot get rid of them one by one, but they are all linked to this sense of limited individuality. This Brahmakara Vritti hammers out that sense of individuality. Once that is gone, the hub is gone, all the desires collapse all at once, all together. So this Brahmakara Vritti, which has developed through the assiduous practice of Shama Dhamma, Titiksha Uparati, Shraddha, at last has resulted in this Samadhana. And this Samadhana results in Mumukshutvam. So what is the Mumukshutvam? Ahankara, just now we discussed it. That same thing is being defined as the Mumukshu. What is that? Ahankaradi dehantan, bandhan agyana kalpitan, swaswarupa avabodhena, moktum ichha mukshuta. This is from Ahankara, that ego. That the self, when it gets identified with the psychophysical existence, the reflection of the self in the psychophysical existence is the ego, Ahankara. Identification with that reflection is the ego. From that develops all the sanskaras. The moment I develop that ego, immediately I feel identified with this body-mind complex. I try to preserve it. Anything which is favorable for its preservation, for its pleasure, for its nourishment, I get attached to them. Whatever is not favorable to it, I have the fight and flight response. These at last results in all my so-called desires and samskaras which follows from it. So when you have already through samadhana developed that Brahmakara Vritti, this speaks of Mumukshutvam. This will help you how? To get rid from the Ahankara to all the various layers of our identification with something which is not the self. In Vedanta they speak of Pancha Kosha, this Annamaya Kosha. Sometimes we think I am the body. Sometimes I think I am the prana, the vital force. Sometimes when you are, because of sickness, you are not having that energy. You say, I am sick. I am weak. You are not weak. It is only the prana shakti which has dwindled. But as you identify yourself with the prana, you say, I am weak. I am energetic. You are not energetic. It is the prana which is energetic. You are beyond this sense of vitality, sense of weakness. But we, because of ignorance, identify ourselves with the prana, with the body, the physical body, which is a product of food. What I eat, that gets transformed into my body. It is not me. With my mind, the mind is constantly wavering. Sometimes it's happy, sometimes it's dejected. I say, I am happy, I am dejected. You're getting identified with the mind. You're getting identified with your buddhi. That whatever convictions you develop, you think you're that. When I say I am Brahman, that is actually identification with the buddhi. Because still you have not gone beyond that thought. And Anandamaya Kosha. That's what is Ananda? When I'm in deep sleep, I feel I am. When I wake up and say, oh, I enjoyed such a nice sleep. So whenever, after any enjoyment speaks of calmness of the mind. That when the mind was agitated, it was having the hankering for certain things. The moment you get the object of hankering, immediately the mind becomes relaxed. There's a let go. It becomes calm. All our happiness is not because of our attainment of the objects of senses. The attainment of the objects of senses ensures the calmness of the mind. And the calmness of the mind speaks of that bliss which comes from within, which is the nature of yourself. And that ananda which we feel after the enjoyment of any senses, after our sense gets satiated, or after deep sleep, speaks of the calmness of the mind through which that bliss, which is the nature of ourselves, is permeating. That is also a type of attachment. It is attachment with that Anandamaya Kosha, with that the sattvic form of your mind. So that is also an attachment, the highest form of attachment. But still that's an attachment. So when you are getting attached with these 5 layers of your existence, because from ahankara, it's with the ego, it starts. This ego, with this ego, you get attached to these 5 layers of existence. That falls off in one go when that ahankara is being eradicated because of this brahmakara vritti. All the spikes which speaks of various desires, which keeps my so-called personality intact in the form of these 5 layers of ignorance as annamaya, pranamaya, manamaya, vijnanamaya, anandamaya. This all falls off. That results in the ultimate liberation. So this is the mumukshutva. With the samadhana, this mumukshutvam develops. So this is, if you try to understand, you will find it's all sequential. If I say I have a tremendous yearning, this yearning is nothing compared to the yearning of one who has developed para vairagya. This vairagya is 2 types. Just to develop renunciation for the objects of senses which is disturbing me. They are the vyakta vasana, manifested desires. That is just dhamma. That is not mumukshutvam. You are just practicing shama and dhamma. Mumukshutvam speaks of this deep contemplation on this brahmakara, this which has taken the form of brahmakara vritti, eka vritti, which alone speaks of the development of the tivra vairagya, where you want to go beyond the body-mind complex. The entire, this fabric of this body-mind complex, of which ego is the hub, that is eradicated. That's taking you beyond this idea of this limited body-mind sense. You go beyond this texture. So that speaks of the mumukshutvam. So ahankara is the reflection of the consciousness in the mind. The moment consciousness gets reflected in the mind, it results in the egotism, and which finds expression in identifying your amness with this aham iti abhimana. This amness, aham iti, I am this. This finds, you immediately, when you have this idea, immediately you identify yourself with these 5 layers of ignorance, this anandamaya, vijnanamaya, manomaya, pranamaya, and annamaya kosha. Thus, ahankara, which results in that mula ajnana, the root cause of ignorance, is that ahankara. All other follows after that. That is the root cause. So that gets annihilated through samadhana. And then what happens? The samadhana alone gives us a real urge, not merely just professing verbally. It's a real urge to get loosened from the bonds that keeps us bound within these 5 layers of identification because of ignorance. So that's the real mumukshutvam. So that's been spoken of as the last practice. And these practices are sequential, one follow the other. Just that's what we were trying to highlight in today's discussion. That it starts with viveka, followed by vairagya, that's followed by shamadamadi, shat sampatti, and that's followed by mumukshutvam, entailing in the ultimate liberation of the self. So that's the fourfold practices that has been described here. Now after that, they will describe that this mumukshutvam can be tivra, can be manda, can be madhya. You may just have some very weak yearning. It can be very intense. Based on whether it's weak or it is intense, it depends the time it requires to really reach that state of spiritual illumination. That when will I attain that spiritual liberation? The answer, even in the Yoga Shastra, it has been spoken of, it depends on the intensity of your mumukshutva. That's Tivra Sangvegana Asanna. In the Yoga Sutra it is there. So this is the idea, that how intense. If you don't have intense yearning, you can again slip back to the old way of living. So that will be highlighted. That will be, the Shankaracharya will be making us aware of the pitfalls of the spiritual journey. That unless we have that intense yearning to be free, we can again fall back. So that he will be describing in the succeeding next few verses, which we will take up again in the next class. So with this, we stop our discussion today. Thank you all. Namaskar.